Luxury clubs, elegant women, prestigious cars, and custom-tailored suits, all lost by a double agent because he paid his electricity bill on time. He feared the late fees, a nearly comedic twist that spiraled into tragedy. This is a story of swift military justice, a death sentence for a traitor, and the first official execution in Israel's history, one that was later proven wrong. A year after his execution, Mayor Tuvinsky was posthumously exonerated. Welcome to a channel dedicated to the history of Israeli intelligence. This content explores events that shaped Israel, focusing on declassified operations and significant cases. Today's episode is part of a series called The Traitors, deliberately left with a question mark so you can draw your own conclusions after hearing the facts. This is not a court to pass judgment, especially since hasty trials can lead to irreversible tragedies. The story of a captain in the Israeli army, his quick execution, and difficult rehabilitation will be covered in the second part. First, another tale catalyzed by a minor robbery. Bangkok, the capital of Southeast Asia, in the 1990s, was both the showcase and the underbelly of the Asian economic miracle. Money, investments, and construction flowed through Bangkok, attracting regional offices of international companies. Yet the city choked on traffic, smog, and chaotic development, while the gap between rich and poor widened. The end of the decade saw the 1997 Asian financial crisis, which began in Thailand and shattered its economic wonder. To the outside world, 1990s, Bangkok was primarily the tourist capital of Southeast Asia, with endless streams of Western tourists, cheap hotels, night markets, and a loud reputation as a center for sex tourism. This industry grew from the Vietnam War era, and by the 1980s 1990s became a crucial, though semi-legal, part of the economy and national image. Areas like Patpong were already globally known as Bangkok's nightlife districts, attracting both regular tourists and those with more dubious interests. Naturally, the city also became a convenient hub for dozens of intelligence agencies. Under the cover of business, tourism, and diplomacy, agents and their handlers easily blended in. Thailand was a popular refuge and transit point for Soviet, Chinese, American, and Israeli intelligence. Researchers note that in Southeast Asia, Soviet residencies actively sought information sources and lucrative cases to fund agents. Beyond the elite operatives of world intelligence, ordinary crime also thrived in Thailand, from major bosses to petty criminals. It was these criminals who, unwittingly, compromised a very important meeting point. Imagine a well-furnished apartment in the capital. Even from outside, it's clear everything is expensive and luxurious. The owner is a polished European, dresses flashily, frequents high-end restaurants, and spends money freely, seemingly part of the local business elite. For Bangkok's criminal elite, this is a red flag and a signal to act. One evening, while the apartment owner enjoys spicy Thai cuisine, thieves break into his home. They work quickly, grabbing the most valuable items from tables and cabinets: money, jewelry, watches, even clothing, anything that might be worth money. They even find a hidden metal box, locked securely. Since it's hidden and locked, it must contain something valuable. But there's no time to open it on the spot. They take it as is. Later, in a safe place, they pry open the box with tools and curses, only to find the disappointment of the year. The wealthy European stored not diamonds, but meticulously kept papers, promissory notes, receipts, bank checks, and invoices. Boring, uninteresting accounting records. They take the loot to a familiar fence, bringing jewelry, watches, cufflinks, and other seemingly expensive items, including the metal box to discard the papers and use it for storage. Here, what in Israel is called mazel, or luck, intervenes. This seems to be the cornerstone of all operations. Who do you think the fence was? Naturally, in Bangkok's slums, sorting stolen goods was a Mossad contact. Where else but Asia? What's surprising? The Mossad contact was experienced and immediately noticed these weren't worthless papers, but accounting records likely linked to the Soviet Union, specifically its intelligence residency in the region. He doesn't show it, though. He acts as if the papers are valuable but not worth overpaying for, acquiring them almost for free. Thus, through a criminal intelligence maneuver, the valuable cargo, bought cheaply, ends up on an analyst's desk in Tel Aviv. Specialists confirm it's the accounting of Soviet intelligence. Upon closer examination, they realize with horror that among the contacts is an Israeli mole. But who is he? No names are given. From these documents they can only ascertain. Date 1983, location Bangkok, target an Israeli with a surname starting with L, codename Mark. A surname starting with L. Seriously, it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. Or, as poetically stated by Yaakov Piri, then head of Shin Bet, who was ordered by Mossad director Shabtai Shavit to transfer the documents immediately, it's like finding a tamarisk tree in the desert, a rare tree visible from afar. Find that tree. It sounds beautiful, but saying is one thing, doing is another. Thus begins meticulous work with a hint of panic and chaos. Archives at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs are scoured for all lists of Israelis serving or present in Thailand in the early 1980s. The papers indicate Mark was recruited in 1983. Diplomats, officers, attaches, businessmen, tourists, everyone is checked from a database of over 700 people. A separate group analyzes bank transfers from Israel to Southeast Asia. Information drips slowly, with interstate requests taking weeks. Hundreds of names, dozens of matches. Some flew to Bangkok. Some served with the UN. Some participated in humanitarian missions. But no real leads or perfect matches. The breakthrough comes almost by chance. In one of the bank printouts from that box, an agent analyst notices a minor transfer of $150. It's a payment for electricity to a firm called East Agro Consulting Limited, registered in Bangkok. The analyst checks the firm. With such a name, it could be involved in anything, and it is. For 6 years, it receives transfers from entities Mossad files list as affiliated with Soviet intelligence. But most importantly, the name on the payment slip, or rather the surname, starts with the right letter, L. Shimon Levinson, a colonel diplomat with an impeccable resume and access to the Israeli Prime Minister's office. Shimon Levinson, unlike many subjects on this channel, did not immigrate to Israel. He was born in Jerusalem in 1933, a native Palestinian with no language or identity struggles. In 1950, he was drafted into the Israel Defense Forces, IDF. He didn't shine exceptionally but steadily climbed the ranks, serving as a military attaché in Turkey, an employee at the Military Documentation Center, and a coordinator between IDF intelligence and the Jordanian army in armistice committees until 1960. Despite failing officer courses several times, he advanced to colonel. In 1970, Levinson joined Shin Bet, the Internal Security Service, serving in the Jerusalem branch, leading a security screening group, and by 1965, handling reliability checks under Mossad's auspices. At one point, he even headed a Mossad base in Ethiopia, a country with a large Jewish community where Israel conducted secret evacuation and supply operations. He also served as IDF representative to the UN. However, in 1978, he officially retired because he was no longer promoted and his nerves gave out. Levinson finds himself in a tough spot. He lived lavishly, believing an officer's status required generosity, but his personal expenses and budget didn't align. His career ladder had stalled, with no promotion in sight. For an intelligence officer, this is a deadly formula. Access to secrets plus stagnation plus financial problems equals potential vulnerability. Debts can make the mind and spine flexible. Levinson considers who might help from his past connections. Bingo! Connections come through. In the early 1980s, he gets a job with an international anti-drug agency in Asia under the UN. This gives him a legitimate platform in a region with Soviet agents and KGB residents. Thus, his early career status, access to high echelons, regional platform in Asia, and financial vulnerability create an ideal entry point for Soviet recruitment. It's important to note that Soviet intelligence activities in Israel and the Middle East were more extensive than publicly acknowledged. Declassified data shows KGB had sources at all levels, as confirmed by intelligence historians. Back to Levinson, the UN anti-drug trafficking position in Thailand paid well enough to cover financial holes and live comfortably. But Levinson isn't that type. He tries to start his own business. Failure. Again, another failure. Repeated unsuccessful attempts. As the saying goes, when one door closes, another opens. For Shimon Levinson, the massive doors of the Soviet embassy in Bangkok swing open hospitably. He goes there himself to offer his services to the KGB for, as he hopes, good compensation. Don't repeat his mistakes. Later, I'll tell how much he earned and what he got from Israel. According to subsequent investigation reports, at the Soviet embassy in Thailand, Shimon was recruited by a KGB officer under diplomatic cover. This officer's name remains officially undisclosed, but newspaper reports indicate he was from the First Chief Directorate, responsible for foreign agent operations. Contact developed classically. First lunches, talks on international affairs, then small gifts, help with trips, offers of consultations. Within months, Levinson has no way out. He becomes a secret collaborator officially. Shin Bet reports state his main motives were greed and a desire to restore justice. He felt the state didn't appreciate his merits, while the KGB promised high appraisal and regular rewards. With Soviet handlers, Levinson is secretly taken to Moscow, formally on a UN trip. In the Soviet Union, he undergoes an accelerated course in conspiracy, encryption, radio communication, and recruitment methods, taught by specialists from the Andropov Red Banner Institute of the KGB, which trained illegals. In Moscow, Shimon is given the codename Mark and develops a cover as a private consulting firm in Southeast Asia for communication and funding. Levinson is instructed to return to Israel and get a job linked to government structures. The KGB hopes his past connections will grant access to information on military, intelligence, and high official activities, especially regarding Israel's policies toward the US and Iran. Equipped with espionage gear, Mark returns to Israel in 1984 and tries to rejoin Mossad. However, the personnel department, reviewing his biography, notes his debts, extravagant lifestyle, and dubious contacts in Asia. This should have been a red flag, but it ends there. Internal services don't share information. Shin Bet didn't have access to Mossad's internal materials, and Mossad didn't notify colleagues about the former employee's suspicious behavior. This systemic failure later leads to loud investigations, but luck turns in Levinson's favor. About a year later, after unsuccessful attempts to secure a KGB-suitable position, Levinson unexpectedly gets an invitation from an old acquaintance, retired Major General Avraham Tamir, recently appointed Director General of the Israeli Prime Minister's office. Tamir considers Levinson a man with diplomatic experience, a good service record, and other useful qualities, offering him the position of Chief Security Officer for the Prime Minister's office. The appointment is in May 1985. From this moment, KGB agent Mark gains access to secret meetings, Mossad and Shin Bet reports, government telegrams, and plans for foreign leaders' visits. According to declassified materials, Levinson regularly transmits to Moscow information on Israel's internal politics, negotiations with the U.S., and Israeli intelligence assessments of events in the USSR and Warsaw Pact countries. He enjoys trust, meets with Ariel Sharon and Shimon Peres, has passes to the most restricted government areas, and continues living lavishly. Expensive cars, travel, gambling, yet remains in debt. The investigation shows the KGB paid him irregularly, often just with promises, a classic tactic to keep an agent controlled. As you recall, finding the tamarisk in the desert was helped by a $150 receipt. Shimon Levinson hurried to pay the electricity bill for the front company to avoid a fine, transferring money from his account. When this is uncovered, round-the-clock surveillance begins. Counterintelligence agents photograph his meetings, analyze routes, and wiretap phones. All information flows to Shin Bet's analytical center. Final reports note Levinson made several trips to Europe and Southeast Asia, met with diplomats from former socialist bloc countries, and had offshore bank accounts. The net tightens daily, everything converges. 1983 Bangkok, UN position, financial troubles, high-level connections. For Mossad and Shin Bet, it's an electric shock. A total check ensues. Investigators work around the clock, reconstructing Levinson's biography. Army service, undercover work in Ethiopia for Mossad, return to Israel, attempt to rejoin intelligence, rejection, then unexpected appointment to the Prime Minister's office via General Tamir's patronage. For years, he was an invisible man handling documents passing through the government head's office. Yaakov Piri later recalls, "When we finally realized Mark was him, I felt not triumph but cold horror." In March 1991, Shin Bet obtains an arrest warrant. The operation is conducted silently, without cameras or press. Investigators lure Levinson back from abroad. He is arrested at Ben Gurion Airport. After a short security chat, he's taken to a separate room where counterintelligence waits. All actions are meticulously planned with police, aviation, and security services coordination. Initially, Levinson denies accusations, but within 48 hours, under pressure from documents, bank statements, intercepted correspondence, and audio recordings, he confesses. Interrogations establish he was recruited by Soviet intelligence in April 1983, underwent accelerated training in Moscow on encryption, radio communication, and agent networks, and regularly transmitted materials on Israel's internal politics, intelligence analysis, not just military secrets. His motive wasn't ideology but financial situation. He expected payments he didn't receive. Documents confirm he earned about $31,000 over years of betrayal, a pittance compared to the damage caused. Shin Bet's official report states the information he passed included internal analytical materials, assessments of Israel's foreign policy positions, and security service methods. His activities didn't sabotage any operations, but struck a heavy blow to trust and prestige in Israeli intelligence. The trial is held behind closed doors due to national security. Case materials are classified. Friends from the Army and intelligence testify, including Ariel Sharon, future Prime Minister, and Raphael Eitan, future Minister for Pensioner Affairs. In August 1991, Levinson is found guilty of treason and sentenced to 12 years imprisonment. An interesting detail: his cellmate is Marcus Klingberg, also a convicted Soviet spy. In the future, we'll make a separate video about him. Whether judicial irony or pity, former colleagues had much to discuss. During his prison years, Levinson's wife leaves him. Friends turn away, and he's expelled from organizations like the Veterans Association. For good behavior, he's released after 7 years with a ban on leaving the country. He lives another 5 years in social isolation in a rented Jerusalem apartment. When the travel restriction is lifted in 2003, Shimon immediately leaves for Thailand under the name Simon Levi, working as an agricultural consultant since his pension is revoked. Levinson's exposure leads to a crisis of trust between Mossad and Shin Bet. It's found that information on suspicious financial operations and personnel risks wasn't properly exchanged between services. Shin Bet reports note the glass walls between agencies allowed the agent to reach the top. Subsequently, new procedures are introduced. Mandatory financial vulnerability checks for all personnel with secret access, data exchange on high-risk individuals, enhanced control over foreign postings and contracts of former officers, and psychological exams for resistance to recruitment. The Levinson case becomes not just an intelligence scandal, but a political one. In 1991, Israel experiences a government change, and the opposition uses the incident to criticize the cabinet. The left accuses intelligence of negligence, the right of bureaucratic chaos. Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, known for his brevity, publicly calls it a lesson Israel paid too dearly for. Inside Mossad, personnel changes occur. Several analytical department heads are transferred, and internal security gets powers to regularly check all former officers in civil service. The arrest story quickly spreads beyond Israel. Moscow's official response is restrained. The USSR Foreign Ministry denies involvement, calling it Cold War speculation. But Western agencies react differently. The CIA and MI6 receive a confidential Mossad report on the Mark case, later used in counterintelligence training as an example of classic weak recruitment, where an agent cooperates due to resentment and debts, not ideology. Interestingly, Americans faced a similar situation. In 1985, Aldrich Ames, a CIA officer, sold Western agents' names to Moscow for money. In a CIA report declassified in 1995, the Levinson case appears as a regional analog to Ames, but with smaller leak scales. In Britain, with fresh memory of the Cambridge Five, analysts study this case, concluding leaks from Levinson could have affected joint Israeli-British operations against Syrian and Iranian weapon supply channels. However, damage to allies is limited primarily because Levinson transmitted general political analysis, not specific operational plans. For Israel, international reaction is dual. Allies express support and sympathy, but during the investigation, Israel's access to some analytical channels is restricted as foreign services verify the cleanliness of Israeli networks. Diplomatically, it's a painful blow. Thus ends the story of Agent Mark, a man who sold his country's secrets for $31,000 and paid with freedom, reputation, and memory. Years later, this whole affair and Levinson himself seemed like a misguided traitor. He wanted to profit, didn't quite succeed, passed information painful for the country but caused no specific, measurable damage, and his punishment wasn't the harshest. He spent his pension years in his beloved Thailand. Perhaps this soft outcome stems from a terrible personal tragedy at Israel's dawn, when representatives of the young country hastily executed a traitor who, it turned out a year later, had betrayed no one. About the ultimate measure applied to a patriot by his own, I'll tell now. Now, how a country lost a battle not in combat. For a whole year, day after day, it fought, then knelt before a lone grave near Beji's, surrendering to a woman long called the traitor's widow and a boy growing up an orphan. So begins a poem by Israeli poet Nathan Alterman, translated by Vikenty Borisov. It was written after the Tuvinsky case echoed nationwide, and is dedicated not just to an episode of the 1948 war, but to how the young army of a newly formed state made a mistaken decision in 3 hours from arrest to shot and carried it out. See for yourself. A man who survived Lithuania, the British Army, Haganah underground, built Jerusalem's electricity networks, and suddenly an enemy, traitor, spy. A field trial without a lawyer, protocol, or right to appeal. 6 soldiers not even told whom they were shooting. Only one widow's persistence and a few politicians' decisions, a year later, turned the case 180 degrees. Before discussing the case, let's understand who Mayor Tuvinsky was. His biography seems bright now, but for nascent Israel, he was a typical representative of his time. Mayor Tuvinsky was born in 1904 in Kovno, now Kaunas, Lithuania. Then service in the Lithuanian army. Tuvinsky wasn't a random man in uniform. He's remembered as a capable, disciplined officer, even awarded for good service. He knew how to live by regulations, make decisions, and take responsibility. Parallelly, he gets an engineering education, crucial later. In the late 1920s, like thousands of East European Jews, he makes Aliyah to mandatory Palestine, settling in Binyamina, an agricultural village. This generation plowed land, built roads, and had good European education. Life, as often in these places, quickly reminds that romance is fine, but there's also daily life and diseases like malaria. Tuvinsky falls ill, and heavy farm work becomes impossible. He seeks physically lighter work and enters the British system, serving in police, then radio services, later on Dead Sea development projects. Importantly, from this point, he's both part of the Jewish Yishuv and British colonial infrastructure, making him valuable yet potentially suspicious to future intelligence. British police didn't much like people sympathetic to Haganah. Once he was even arrested for murder and underground links but acquitted for lack of evidence. During WWII, Tuvinsky volunteers for the British Army, serves in engineering units, rises to major. This is key. He's not a random engineer but knows military discipline and strategic infrastructure work. After demobilization, he becomes an engineer in Jerusalem, first with the British company Machin Allenby, then with the Jerusalem Electric Company, Hevrat Hashmol. Simultaneously, he's an active Haganah member. By 1948, Mayor Tuvinsky is an electricity network engineer, officer with British Army experience, with access to Jerusalem's critical infrastructure, and a member of the Jewish underground. Such a man is accused of being an enemy agent months after state creation. To understand how the accusation arose, transport to 1948 Jerusalem, not the tourist or religious city imagined today, but a besieged city under bombardment, divided in two, front lines close, All approaches under fire, water, food, ammunition running low, everything convoy controlled. The young state of Israel is just forming. Yesterday's underground fighters become IDF officers with combat experience but no state management experience, especially no polished legal system. Remember, before state proclamation, spy cases in the underground were handled simply. Catch a suspect informing to British or Arabs, quick trial, sometimes none, and execution. Ruthless rules of war. Now imagine the same but with a formal state army, psychology still underground, legal frames supposedly state-like. In this context, Jerusalem has another factor. The enemy fires too accurately. Jordanian Arab Legion shells hit not randomly but often key points: warehouses, command posts, infrastructure including electricity supply. Up in headquarters, people ask, where does the enemy get such precise data? In siege atmosphere, this isn't academic, it's life or death. Logic followed by many was simplistic. If the enemy hits accurately, someone inside leaks coordinates, starting a classic spy hunt. Now consider what pieces form the spy portrait in officers' minds. First, access to information. Tuvinsky, an engineer in the electricity supply company, has detailed schematics of power lines, substations, strategic objects. If you know where the enemy's command post, warehouse, or pump station is powered, you can cripple them with a few hits. Tuvinsky had access. Second, British connections. He worked in British camps, interacted with British engineers and officials in the electric company. To young IDF officers, this is a man who visits the British. In war, easily becomes terrible suspicion. What if he tells them our secrets? Third, coincidence. Headquarters makes primitive but understandable comparisons. Object hit accurately, it's schematic, person with access. Suspicion focuses on Tuvinsky. He seems a convenient candidate. Military engineer, worked with British, access to documents, speaks English, moves between objects. Fourth, lack of proper counterintelligence. Ideally, check alternative leak scenarios. Correlate shelling times with people's movements. Analyze if data could be available from other sources. Check motives. In practice, investigation was simpler and cruder. Coincidence exists, explanation we like, so it's truth. On this foundation, accusation of terrible war crime, treason during war is built. Understand, we now, decades later, sit calmly and see logical holes. Decision makers then were under immense pressure, not an excuse, but a factor explaining how this could happen. On June 30, 1948, for Tuvinsky, it starts as a normal day. He's at Carmel Market in Tel Aviv buying fruits for his wife and child. People in uniform approach, ask him to come for an urgent meeting. Sounds strange now, but then war, poor communication, plausible. Things change daily, inspections, meetings. Tuvinsky gets in the car without second thought. En route, the picture changes. Instead of colleagues, he's met by military intelligence Shea people. Formally not arrest yet, but questions are alarming. Gradually, it's clear this isn't a meeting. Instead of Tel Aviv, he's taken to Hulda area, then to an abandoned house near Arab village Beji's, not far from today's Kibbutz Harel. Well-chosen spot, far from city, secluded but accessible, suitable for field trial. Tuvinsky, by accounts, doesn't grasp the scale until the end. He thinks he'll be harshly interrogated about contacts or documents. But the scenario in accusers' minds is harsher. The field trial has 4 officers. Chief of Military Intelligence Isser Berry, with Avraham Kidron, David Karen, and Binyamin Ghibli. The latter plays a key role in another traitor video on this channel. Watch if you haven't. Why know these officers? Because the same people gathered evidence, formed the accusation, then should objectively review the case, conflict of interest any lawyer would balk at. Now, the procedure. First, no protocol. A normal court, even military, must record who said what, questions, answers. For Tuvinsky, no full transcript, only some notes and memories. Second, no lawyer. Tuvinsky had no defender to help formulate answers, demand evidence, call witnesses. He's alone against 4 officers convinced of his guilt. As proof, Isser Barry doesn't attend the hearing because he fetches the firing squad before the verdict. Third, no defense witnesses. No colleagues or superiors called to testify on his work, trustworthiness, or alternative explanations. None. By memories, a damning factor was Tuvinsky not denying British links. He did collaborate for work. This convinces the commission of his guilt. So, what normal bureaucracy saw as duty, engineer sending technical reports, is interpreted as passing secret info to a foreign country. From de facto detention to being shot, about 3 hours. 3 hours from officer and engineer going to a meeting to condemn traitor before a wall. After verdict, everything happens lightning fast. He's led to a prepared spot, a pit near that abandoned house at Bages. A squad from Yiftach Brigade is already there, brought earlier by Barry. Soldiers aren't told whom they're shooting. They're told it's an enemy spy, sentence approved by command. For young fighters in war, that's enough to pull the trigger. Tuvinsky isn't allowed to write to his wife or appeal to David Ben-Gurion, whom he knew personally from underground work. No time to even accept what's happening. Command, a volley of shots, and Mayor Tuvinsky dies as a traitor and spy, so initial documents state. His body is buried nearby without honors, his name better forgotten. But here things differ. So Mayor Tuvinsky executed as traitor. For Army intelligence, a small officer circle, case closed, but for one person it just begins. His wife, Helena. Understand she isn't called that evening and told officially. First, oppressive silence. War, chaos, people disappear, communication breaks, realistic scenario. He could have died en route under shelling, out of contact. Time passes. The widow lives in hope and fear, not knowing. Then a blow. She learns of the execution from newspapers, not from unit commander or courier, and learns of him not as officer, engineer, British Army volunteer, but as traitor. Imagine Helena alone with a child, no explanations, and everyone starts seeing her as the traitor's wife. Many might disappear, leave, change names, shut down. Helena does the opposite. She's convinced her husband couldn't be a spy. She knows his biography, character, saw him volunteer, risk for the country. She starts asking questions, colleagues, acquaintances, people who might know, each time hitting a wall of silence, but she doesn't give up. Gradually, her path leads where an ordinary person shouldn't be, corridors of power. At some point, Tuvinsky's widow's story reaches decision-makers. A key figure is legal advisor to the government, Yakov Shimshon Shapira, who must ensure the young state stays within law even in war. He gets a case where law is hard to apply. Field trial without protocols, lawyer, any procedures. One sheet of paper with investigation, sentence, and execution report. Shapira sees something very wrong. Parallelly, David Ben-Gurion has accumulated questions about military intelligence chief Isser Barry, involved in other dark stories. Killing an Arab agent, torture, unauthorized executions. On one hand, Barry is a Haganah hero, led intelligence in toughest years. On the other, his methods less compatible with state order Ben-Gurion envisions. The Tuvinsky case is the last straw. A principled decision. Reinvestigate officially. with a commission, documents, checking all steps. For a young country, a serious move. War just ended, enemies around, scarce resources, and leadership digs into own mistakes, possibly admitting army wrongly executed an officer. Political and moral risk, but without it, no normal state grows. The commission works on different logic, not confirm sentence justice, but honestly answer if evidence against Tuviansky was sufficient to deem him traitor. As they dissect the case, the picture becomes shocking. First, evidence base. Most evidence is indirect coincidences and interpretations. Yes, Tuviansky transmitted technical documents to British, but that was his job. Second, information access. The commission finds the info officers feared wasn't unique. British administration, other specialists had similar data. The idea that enemy got super-secret schematics via Tuviansky doesn't hold. Third, trial procedure. From a legal view, the field trial failed almost all fairness criteria. Judges and investigators, same people. No lawyer, no defense witnesses, no protocol, sentence executed in maximum haste without review possibility. The commission's result is unequivocal. No evidence of Tuviansky's treason. The man was executed without sufficient grounds. In 1949, the State of Israel officially exonerates Mayor Tuviansky. The Defense Ministry recognizes he fell in line of duty. David Ben-Gurion writes to Helena, calling her husband a good soldier and patriot. Tuviansky's body is reinterred with honors on Mount Herzl, where Israel's fallen lie. Rehabilitation articles are printed in all leading publications, read obligatorily to army ranks and government offices. Thus, the man shot as traitor returns to national memory as a victim of error and an officer who died for his country. But history doesn't end with rehabilitation. If it were just, oops, we erred, sorry, move on, that would be a bad signal. The state makes another key decision. Someone must bear personal responsibility. So, in the dock, Barry is found guilty. The court sentences him to 1 day in prison, minimal possible, a symbolic gesture. Moreover, he doesn't even spend that day in a cell. President Chaim Weizmann pardons him. Reactions vary. Some say good guilt is acknowledged, a breakthrough for a young state. Others say punishment disproportionate to tragedy scale. But fact remains. The Tuviansky case becomes the first precedent where army and intelligence leadership publicly admit a fatal error, and someone, albeit symbolically, answered. Another hero of this story, not military, lawyer, or politician, poet Nathan Alterman. In post-war years, his seventh column in newspapers was like society's conscience, publishing poems commenting on current events, raising uncomfortable questions, discussing moral dilemmas of the young country. After Tuviansky's rehabilitation, Alterman publishes the poem, The Traitor's Widow, Almanat Ha-Bogd. Perhaps it best summarizes this tale. After it, nothing to add. The Prime Minister could have covered up the crime, cited higher good, but decided this must set an example, truth above all reputations. To bravely rush into desperate battle, not tremble before death, but to kneel and repent before a widow. That is the highest valor, believe me. If you found this exploration of intelligence history and moral complexities engaging, please like this video to support the channel. Subscribe for more deep dives into declassified operations and historical cases that shaped nations. Share your thoughts in the comments and pass this story along to others who appreciate intricate tales of espionage, and Justice Apps it best summarizes this tale. After it, nothing to add. The state admitted guilt and asked forgiveness. Name any other country where someone would do so. The Prime Minister could have covered up the crime, cited higher good, but decided this must set an example, truth above all reputations, to bravely rush into desperate battle, not tremble before death, but to kneel and repent before a widow. That is the highest valor, believe me. If you found this exploration of intelligence history and moral complexities engaging, please like this video to support the channel. Subscribe for more deep dives into declassified operations and historical cases that shaped nations. Share your thoughts in the comments and pass this story along to others who appreciate intricate tales of espionage and justice.